Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we sift through a wealth of information to bring you the essential knowledge and surprising insights you need to be truly well-informed. Today, we're plunging into a chilling, yet utterly fascinating realm. The minds of the most dangerous criminals. Our hook. Well, it's this profound and unsettling idea that to truly catch a monster, you sometimes have to understand what it's like to be one.
It's a concept that really forces you to confront the darker aspects of human psychology, isn't it?
Hmm.
Our deep dive today is an exploration of the groundbreaking work of John Douglas. You know, the FBI agent often called a modern Sherlock Holmes. We'll be digging into first-hand accounts, detailed case studies, and some surprisingly candid personal reflections from his memoir, Mindhunter.
That's right. And our mission today is really to unpack how behavioral profiling was developed, what its core principles are, and frankly, how it absolutely revolutionized criminal investigations. It all comes back to that searing question, the one that plagues investigators and the public too. What kind of person could have done such a thing?
Hmm.
So you're going to learn the crucial difference between a killer's modus operandi, their MO, and their signature. We'll get into some surprising insights and even see how understanding human vulnerability can be the key. So as we begin to unpack this, looking at the very origins of profiling, where do we start? What really stands out?
Well, what's fascinating here is how far back the roots actually go. You might think it's a modern science, but it really has a strong foundation in literature. We all know characters like Poe's C. August Dupin or, of course, Sherlock Holmes.
Right, the classic detectives.
Exactly. They weren't just solving mysteries. They were using keen observation to draw conclusions about people from their actions. Wilkie Collins, too, doing pioneering work there.
Okay, so from brilliant fiction to, well, concrete criminal justice. How do you scale that kind of individual brilliance? How do you make it systematic for law enforcement? Who really bridged that gap in the real world?
That would really be Dr. James Russell.
Yeah.
Back in the 1950s, he gave this uncannily accurate profile of the Mad Bomber in New York.
The Mad Bomber profile, yes, that was
It
legendary.
was incredibly specific. Heavy, middle-aged, foreign-born, Roman Catholic, single, lives with a sibling,
Uh,
even down to wearing a double-breasted suit, buttoned.
wow.
Russell basically flipped the traditional psychiatric process. Instead of looking at a person to predict behavior, he used the behavior, the evidence, to predict the person. A
Yeah.
real landmark moment.
That is an incredible level of detail for that era. It sounds almost like magic, it's accuracy, but surely there was skepticism from the more traditional, boots on the ground cops. How did the FBI eventually get into this whole profiling game?
Oh, absolutely. There was skepticism. Lots of it. People preferred hard evidence. The FBI's breakthrough really started with a behavioral science unit, the BSU, at Quantico in 1972. Initially, it was more focused on teaching applied criminal psychology. Guys like Howard Teeton and Pat Mullaney were the early instructors.
Okay, so they formed the BSU, but what did Douglas and his colleagues realize was maybe missing from just teaching theory? How did they fill that gap?
Well, they felt uncomfortable basically teaching from hearsay, secondhand accounts. They hadn't directly experienced the cases or, crucially, interviewed the offenders themselves. So that led to this really systematic hands-on effort. They started doing road schools, going to crime scenes, and most importantly, conducting direct prison interviews with violent offenders. Real face-to-face stuff.
Ah, okay, so getting into the trenches, so to speak.
Exactly. And this is where that truly key distinction emerged. Modus operandi, or MO, versus signature.
Right, the MO versus signature. That feels absolutely central. Let's break that down. Why was understanding the MO, what the perpetrator does to commit the crime, so important? And the fact that it evolves.
The MO is, well, it's their learned behavior, their method. It's highly adaptable, right? Based on what works, what doesn't, how to avoid getting caught. It's what they do to commit the crime, and it can change. Like a bank robber might switch from yelling to passing a note.
Makes sense? Practical adjustments.
Yeah, tactical, practical, avoiding identification, things like that.
Okay, so that's the MO, the toolbox. But then there's the signature, which sounds much deeper, more ingrained. What defines that?
The signature is different. It's a unique personal compulsion. It's what the perpetrator has to do to fulfill some kind of internal fantasy. Often it goes way beyond what's needed just to commit the crime.
Ah, so it's the psychological need driving it.
Precisely. It's the why behind the what. And that distinction, that became the absolute core of the Investigative Support Unit, the ISU. That's what
Yep.
Douglas renamed it later.
Right, when he famously said he wanted to take the BS out.
Yes, exactly. He wanted it to be practical, grounded, less theoretical sounding than behavioral science unit.
I love that. And speaking of Douglas, His own path into this work wasn't exactly typical, was it? Not the straight-A student type you might expect.
Not at all. John Douglas, well, he wasn't a standout student. More BC plus here.
Yeah.
He was interested in animals, thought about being a vet, but he had this natural flair for storytelling, which is huge for a detective, right? Making sense of clues, building a narrative,
Yeah, connecting the dots.
and his experiences in sports, psyching out batters in baseball, acting like a nut in football to get an edge, that gave him this kind of groundwork for understanding behavior manipulation.
Yeah.
He learned early on that acting crazy doesn't mean you are crazy. You can know exactly what you're doing.
So he had this knack for reading people early on. How did those maybe unconventional experiences prepare him for the FBI? And what were those initial bureau years actually like? Glamorous Mindhunter stuff from day one.
Huh? Far from it. His early FBI time was, well, less than glamorous. He talks about dirty words training, literally a spelling test on swear words.
Seriously?
Yeah. And this baffling bureaucracy under Hoover. There was even a quota for letters of censure. Douglas got told he scored 99% on a test, but Hoover wanted to prove no one was perfect. Just bizarre.
That sounds incredibly frustrating, almost designed to grind you down. Did he ever talk about how that might maybe inadvertently shape agents psychologically?
He definitely saw it as part of the mental toughening. Learning to navigate that kind of illogical system maybe prepared them for the illogical nature of some criminals. And it wasn't just bureaucracy, it was dangerous too. He talks about having his first gun stolen in Detroit like less than a month on the job.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, realizing he was basically supplying weapons to the enemy, constant threat of street violence, rocks thrown at cars, even dogs didn't like them apparently.
And he learned some clever tricks too, right? Like these pretext calls from guys like Bob McGonigal.
Oh, McGonigal was legendary, an artist with accents. He even pranked another agent, pretending to be a black militant informant.
No way.
Yeah, it shows the dynamics, the sometimes weird humor within the Bureau.
Yeah.
Like their boss, Neil Welch, chewed McGonigal out for a call, then apparently laughed about it later with someone else.
It sounds like those early days were a real pressure cooker. And eventually that intensity, that pressure, it took a massive personal toll on Douglas, didn't it?
It absolutely did. He was juggling something like 150 active cases at once, traveling 125 days a year, all over the country, different time zones. It led to this severe anxiety attack and then a near-fatal collapse in Seattle. A ruptured brain.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. He described having doll's eyes, being packed in ice, friends, family praying at his bedside. It was incredibly serious. He lost 35 pounds during the long recovery. Was terrified he couldn't even shoot his gun anymore.
That's terrifying, life-altering. How did going through something like that, being a victim himself in a way, how did that change his perspective on the work, on the actual victims?
He said it directly connected him to the victim's perspective. He realized he had to be able to put himself in their shoes to truly understand the crime. He felt like he was being tormented by the killers he'd interviewed, like now he was the victim. It deepened his empathy profoundly. But you know, even after all that, the Bureau still censured him over comments he made on the Wayne Williams case.
Still, after nearly dying.
Yep. It just illustrated what Douglas called the high-risk, no-fin-gain reality of the job sometimes.
That must have been incredibly frustrating. But there was also a moment, wasn't there? A moment of real appreciation from his colleagues that showed the true value of their work.
There was. When he first went back to Quantico after his recovery, he was still recovering, wearing slippers because his feet were swollen. And about 50 profilers from different field offices just gave him this spontaneous standing ovation.
Wow.
It really showed the respect and value they placed on the work, amongst themselves. A huge contrast to the formal reprimands.
Okay, so with that foundation laid, and Douglas having this deepened empathy, let's go inside the minds of the killers themselves. This criminal personality research project, that was a huge deal, right?
Massive, a systematic effort funded by a $400,000 grant from the National Institute of Justice. They did these incredibly detailed interviews with 36 to 40 incarcerated felons using this exhaustive 57-page questionnaire.
57 pages. So why? Why would these hardened criminals agree to cooperate with the FBI, it seems? Counterintuitive.
Well, Douglas found they cooperated for all sorts of reasons. Some, like Ed Kemper maybe, seemed to genuinely feel remorse or wanted to understand themselves better. Others, they were police buffs, enjoyed the attention, the thrill of being around agents. Some maybe hoped for some benefit, even though none was offered.
And some just wanted to talk about it.
A lot of them, yeah. Welcome the chance to relive their fantasies in graphic detail. But Douglas always stressed these guys are manipulative. They'll say whatever serves their purpose at that moment. Remorseful 1 minute, maybe playing up mental instability the next, he had to be careful.
Right, always keep that in mind. Let's get into some specific cases then, because the insights are just chilling, but also surprisingly nuanced. Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer.
Camper, yeah. Deeply dysfunctional family background. As a kid, he dismembered cats, then murdered his grandparents. Later, his victims included his own mother. He even, disturbingly, put her larynx down the garbage disposal.
Jeez.
But Douglas noted his police buff side, his charm, how articulate he was. And this wasn't just about Kemper. It led to a foundational insight, shifting from seeing these guys as just born evil to understanding how unresolved rage, especially like, say, a dominant mother figure, could literally manufacture a killer,
Yeah.
displacing that anger onto other women.
That idea of a manufactured killer, not just born evil, that's a critical shift in thinking. What about Charles Manson? So much myth around him.
Manson, yeah. Surprisingly small guy, apparently,
Oh.
like 5'2", 5'3". Yeah. Douglas figured his power over the family came from extreme control methods, sleep deprivation, sex, food, drugs, like a POW camp dynamic almost. Douglas didn't think Manson actually planned the Todd LaBianca murders in detail. He thought Manson lost control, things got out of hand, and then he had to escalate, do them one better, to keep his authority.
Interesting. Maintain the image.
Right. Douglas even speculated that if Manson ever got out, he wouldn't kill again. He'd probably just wander off into the desert or try to cash in on his notoriety.
Okay, next up, Richard Speck, the murderer of 8 student nurses. What was the key insight from him? How did he differ?
Speck was different. He was classified as a mass murderer, not serial, meaning one single explosive event, no cooling off period between victims. And he apparently didn't like being lumped in with the others he saw as crazy.
Right.
He had that Born to Raise Hell tattoo.
Yeah.
And there's that incredibly disturbing story from prison. Nursing an injured sparrow, then throwing it into a fan because he couldn't keep it. If I can't have it, no one can. It revealed this low sophistication, adolescent impulsive behavior, a volatile mix of immaturity and rage. Douglas also mentioned Speck was literally tearing paint off the walls and eating it in a special cell, designed to calm aggression.
Wow. Quite a contrast to Kemper's articulation. What about Monte Russell? What did his case teach them about triggers and maybe victim behavior?
Rissell really highlighted triggering stressors, losing a job, losing a girlfriend, common things that could set someone off. And his first victim, a prostitute, she tried to diffuse the situation by asking, which way he wanted it. But that paradoxically enraged him. He saw it as her trying to control him, reinforcing his view of women as whores, depersonalization.
But he let another victim go.
He did, because she talked about caring for her cancer-stricken father. She became personalized to him. It showed how crucial victim behavior could be in the analysis, how a small shift could inflame or de-escalate. Douglas also noted they often got the age wrong initially. They expected mid-20s. Russell was barely 19.
Fascinating. The son of Sam, David Berkowitz, another huge name. What surprising insights did he offer, especially about behavior after the crimes?
Berkowitz, adopted background. He revealed something crucial. He was often on the hunt nightly and frequently returned to crime scenes or disposal areas.
Why? Remorse.
Not always. Sometimes yes, but often just to relive the fantasy, the power. Douglas realized this was a significant common pattern for serial offenders. His son of Sam letters. Douglas discussed them with him. They apparently stemmed from deep anger and inadequacy towards women, especially his adopted mother. Douglas didn't find him particularly charismatic, just always searching for recognition, which kind of surprised psychologists who'd found all this depth in the letters. Douglas saw mostly superficiality.
Interesting. And finally, Jerry Brudos. What did his case show about the maybe meticulous side of some killers?
Brudos was a shoe fetishist whose compulsion escalated to murder. The chilling detail there was how he inadvertently photographed himself, his own reflection, while taking pictures of a victim he'd posed in his garage, dressed in specific attire.
Oh, wow, an accidental clue.
Exactly. It showed this surprising level of organization, almost a clinical detachment, mixed in with the horrific acts. What became so clear through all these interviews, these horrible stories, was that underneath the monstrosity, there were often these deeply human, albeit totally warped, motivations. Need for control, inadequacy, a perverse search for connection. They weren't just abstract monsters. They were reflections of unresolved human pain, just manifested violently. And understanding that became fundamental to profiling, effectively.
So armed with these disturbing but incredibly valuable insights from those interviews, how did the unit actually apply this? How did they use it to crack cases? Can you walk us through the Francine Elvison case?
Yeah, the Elvson case is a great example of applying profiling, especially for what they called a disorganized offender. Based on really limited evidence, no tools brought to the scene, victim didn't seem to struggle, sexual mutilation, but no actual intercourse. Douglas built this profile. He predicted an average-looking white male, 25-35, probably disheveled, unemployed, nocturnal, living with parents or an older female relative, likely within half a mile.
Half a mile. That's specific.
Yeah. Single, no real relationships, high school or maybe college dropout, low self-esteem, probably no car or license, and maybe a history of mental health issues, medication, maybe even institutions.
That's an incredibly detailed picture from what sounds like not much physical evidence. What was the thinking behind those deductions?
Well, the spontaneous nature, no tools pointed to impulsive, disorganized. The sexual stuff, mutilation without intercourse, using substitutes like an umbrella or pen, suggested deep psychological issues, compulsion, sexual dysfunction. The victim not struggling implied she knew him, at least by sight.
Oh.
And his habits nocturnal, no car, suggested he lived very close by, limited mobility. The ritualistic elements pointed toward that mental instability.
And did this incredibly precise profile actually lead them to someone?
It absolutely did.
Right.
The suspect, Carmine Calabro. He fitted almost perfectly. 30 years old, unemployed actor, lived in the same building as the Elvsons with his widowed father, unmarried, history of relationship trouble,
Wow.
high school dropout, collective bondage, and S&M porn. And crucially, bite marks found on Francine's body. They later matched his dental impressions. That led to his conviction. The hair found initially, the African-American hair, total red herring, unrelated.
Incredible. What about the Mary Frances Stoner case? This is where that idea of everybody has a rock comes in, right? And a really revolutionary interrogation strategy.
Yes, the Stoner case was huge for interrogation strategy. Mary Frances was just 12, a low-risk victim. Douglas profiled the killer. Darrell Jean DeVere. White male, 24, maybe married with problems or divorced, blue-collar job, likely history of arson or rape, confident, cocky personality. Even predicted he'd drive a black or blue car.
And the interrogation plan for DeVere was pretty intense, designed to break him.
It really was. Douglas advised staging it at night in the police station, make him uncomfortable, imply constant pressure. He told them to suggest they understood the suspect's stress, but then, controversially, to actually project blame onto the victim.
I am the victim.
Yeah. Suggest she seduced him, or she threatened blackmail, and then introduce the idea of blood evidence, implying they'd find traces even if they hadn't yet. It was this combination of psychological pressure and, well, strategic deception.
And it worked.
It broke him. DeVere confessed. He was later executed.
So this led to that core idea, everybody has a rock. What does that mean exactly in this context?
It's Douglas's principle that everyone, no matter how tough, how smart, how controlled they seem, everyone has a core vulnerability, an emotional trigger, something that can be, well, exploited. He used a hypothetical example, a public corruption case. You target a clerk with money problems or family medical issues, especially around a holiday. Leverage that family connection, the thing they care most deeply about.
Find their weak spot.
Find their rock. And a real-life example, almost shockingly simple, was with Gary Trapnell, the hijacker.
Right, the Arlington Cemetery story.
Exactly. Douglas just told Trapnell that if he ever got out, FBI agents would stake out his father's grave at Arlington on specific dates. Christmas, his birthday, anniversary of death. Trapnell deeply loved and respected his military father. And hearing that, he just gave this little sardonic smile and said, "You got me." It showed even the sharpest criminals have that emotional core, that vulnerability.
Okay, shifting to some really high-stakes cases now. The Atlanta child murders Kai. That must have been immense pressure for the unit.
Unbelievable pressure, young black children disappearing, being murdered, widespread fear, huge political sensitivity. Douglas's profile was groundbreaking at the time. He suggested the killer was likely a young black male, probably with feelings of sexual inadequacy, using some kind of ruse related to music or performing arts, and killing when rejected.
Which went against some other theories, right?
Completely contradicted theories like KKK involvement, which were floating around and highly charged.
And this profile caused a lot of controversy for Douglas himself. He got censured again.
He did. For publicly stating Wayne Williams looked pretty good for a good percentage of the killings. Accurate, maybe, but politically explosive at the time. That high-risk, no-fin-gain thing again. Douglas was still key in the trial, though. He advised the prosecution on how to cross-examine Williams, focusing on his really over-controlled, rigid personality. Williams was convicted for 2 adult murders, but Douglas always maintained the evidence probably didn't link him to all the child deaths. It was complex.
The Robert Hansen case in Alaska is another fascinating one. Using profiling to get a search warrant that was a first, wasn't it?
It was a huge step for profiling's legitimacy. Hansen seems respectable, a baker, a known hunter in Anchorage. The profile suggested someone who saw prostitutes as fair game, almost like animals to be hunted. It mentioned his stutter, often a sign of that internal struggle for control.
And they predicted he'd keep trophies.
Yes. And sure enough, in the search, they found animal heads, but also victims' jewelry, and this aviation map marked with grave sites, all in his trophy room. Hansen even asked that chilling question, you can't rape a prostitute, can you? Just revealed that complete dehumanization.
Now, a really personal one, a threat from within their own ranks almost, the Judd Ray case.
Yeah, that was deeply disturbing. Judson Ray, a close friend and colleague of Douglas's, his own wife tried to have him murdered for the life insurance. This case really hammered home the importance of noticing radical change in behavior as a pre-offense indicator. Like, his wife suddenly became unusually calm, started making him coffee every morning after 13 years of never doing it. Small things, but stark deviations.
And Judd's survival sounds like a miracle. How did his experience reinforce their insights?
Absolute miracle. Drugged, shot, left for dead. A phone operator basically saved his life because she wouldn't hang up. She sensed something was really wrong, despite thinking he might just be drunk. And even from his hospital bed, Judd himself identified the key clue, seeing calls to Columbus on a phone bill. That unraveled the whole plot his wife had orchestrated. It just drove home how crucial those subtle pre-offense behavioral shifts are.
Okay, let's just circle back one last time to that critical MO versus signature distinction. A couple more examples to really cement its value.
Sure, the Buffalo .22 caliber killer and the Midtown slasher cases in New York.
Yeah.
The MO, the methods, shooting versus stabbing, totally different.
Right.
But the signature, the underlying motivation was consistent. Racial hatred. Linking those crimes depended entirely on seeing past the changing MO to the constant signature. Or George Waterfield Russell Jr. in Seattle. His signature involved posing victims provocatively, escalating sexual elements, rifle in the vagina, dildo in a mouth, really specific personal stuff, even though his MO, how or where he killed, might vary. It also highlights that profiling isn't, an exact science. Douglas and his colleague Bob Ressler famously disagreed on whether Jeffrey Dahmer was legally sane. Shows there's still room for interpretation.
So, looking back at this whole journey, John Douglas, the ISC, what's the big takeaway? What did this work really mean for crime fighting and understanding behavior?
Well, it means they took criminal investigation from maybe educated guessing and turned it into a behavioral science. Through incredibly tough research, those harrowing interviews, they proved its value, narrowing suspects, developing interrogation strategies that actually worked, putting truly dangerous people away. They showed that by really digging into the why, law enforcement could get much better at finding the who.
And that brings us right back to that core vulnerability, doesn't it? The rock.
Mm.
If every one of us really does have a rock, a hidden vulnerability, something that can be triggered for good or ill, what does that tell you about human connection? About the unseen battles people fight every single day? What might your rock be? And what does that reveal about you? Something to definitely think about long after this deep dive is over.